So before I get into it today, I thought I'd show you my paint drawer. This is my golden retarder that I use to slow the drying process of the acrylic paints. And over here on the left, I've got my background tones. In the middle, I've got my cheaper paints that I use. I use that for the underpainting. And then I've got two sets of Winsor & Newton mixes. This is my cold set at the front and my warm set at the back. So today I'll be using my cold set. Just recedes slightly, and as I'm working on a blurry section, I want it to sort of fade into the background, and I'll be using some nice soft old frayed brushes. So this is my palette. I've got 8 of my 10 tones in here. I don't have the absolute black or the absolute white, but in this section I probably won't even be using the lighter and the darker 2 tones, obviously, because this is the blurry side and it's in the shadow area. There is some infill coming in, but there's no real highlights. So probably I'll be sort of in this range here, keeping the highlights nice and subdued so that it doesn't draw attention from the rest of the work. And really, on my floating table, on my easel here, I keep a tea towel or piece of paper towel. And basically what I do when I put paint on the brush is I take a lot of that paint off so that the brush is quite dry. And when the brush is dry, I can really, when the brush is dry, you can really work those dry blends, and as you cross over the tones, you can start to get that real softness in there. So that's kind of the technique that I'm using for this area. And for the larger parts, let's do one. For these larger parts here, I am using a 000 brush. And I try and wet blend quite a bit here because this is the blurry section. I really try and grab both paints and work them into each other. As much as I can, in that way I can get nice soft blends. So these are sort of tones 5, 6 and 7 roughly. And as I go, I just pick up more paint, dry off the brush, you know, work those into each other. I always feel like in this sort of section, its form is obviously really important, but the appearance of softness is vital to my work, really, and probably more important than the more specific form, because the detailed section of the painting describes form really well. I focus more on the form in the detailed section, and so as you're viewing the work, you sort of take the detail from the detailed section and impart your own interpretation of what's in this sort of blurrier section here. So I don't worry as much on that. And so we're just going to move through this urchin, just shift into a lighter tone. Again, I want to try and be doing as much wet blending as I can. last thing to do is just creep. I'll work this shadow later. Pardon me. But what I do want to do while I've got the wet paint is just get the edge of that shadow into this bump so that the bump is done. So that's kind of how I'll work this section, which I'll skip forward in that. But as I'm doing the edge, I'll be using 5&0, which is smaller. And even though the edge here is even softer because it's going away from the camera, I like using a smaller brush here because it gives me much more control. This background is built up over many layers, and you can see this really subtle transition, and what I don't want to do is accidentally get paint over to here because it's built up in layers. It isn't that easy just to touch up. So basically what I do is I'm picking up a tone here, and what I'm going to do is put the tone down well away from the edge. So this is where I'm putting the tone down, but the edge is 1/2 centimeter over. I'm going to dry the brush and then just pick that tone up so that you're really just putting the smallest amount over that edge. And then as the brush dries, you can really sort of dissipate it into. So that's a dry blend into the background. So if you are enjoying watching this, please do hit that subscribe button and follow my channel. These shadows here are actually starting to get lighter again, because what I really want to do is dull this area down as much as I can in terms of contrast and tone, because the water droplet is going to be right next to it, and so to lift that water droplet off the page to make it look glossy and glassy and sharp. It's not only the sharp lines and the high contrast in the water droplet which do that, but it's also how it sits relative to the work around it. And so over here, all these tones, I mean, this is my highlight, but this is a mid-tone going in here. And not only is it a mid-tone, it's going to be really well blended between the shadows and the highlights, so that it's not seeking any attention. I'll work on that in a bit. Well, thanks for watching. I'm going to skip forward a bit and show you what this area looks like when it's done. So this section is pretty much finished, just working on this last little bit. Nice muted tones, and really looking forward to working on the water droplet, which I thought I'd show you now. And as I'm finishing this water droplet, this pretty much wraps up this urchin, and time for something else.